In an RPG, the player's character, known by the alias Hero of Another World, would face off against the NPC villain Arachne, one of the Demon King's 4 elite demons. She informs him that she won't let the Demon King have him, as she plans to use him as her own puppet. However, the player knows that it doesn't matter if you don't defeat the mid-boss in a speedrun, so he decides to skip the battle by exploiting a glitch in the game. A few hours later, at the RTA convention in Tokyo, the player overcame the final glitch of the game and defeated the final boss, with a record time of 25 minutes and 56 seconds. Everyone around him started to applaud and congratulate him, as he was announced as the world record holder in the RTA competition. The player's name was recorded as Shachiku Taitei. RTA is a competition about playing a game from the beginning and seeing how fast a player can finish it. In RTA, while exceptional gameplay is a given, some cheats like running on railings where players aren't allowed, clipping through walls, soft resetting to skip scenes, or continuing the game while the menu screen is still active, are methods that help finish the game quickly. These methods take advantage of software bugs. During a commentary session, the host mentioned that the average playtime to complete the game is over 100 hours, and he couldn't believe that someone would one day finish it in 25 minutes. The host asked Taitei what he would reward himself with. After a long day, Taitei anticlimactically replied that he had to do weekend work for his boss's presentations. Amidst the comments about his gameplay, what really hurt Taitei was the criticism for missing one final glitch. While playing the game at home, he realized that even after practicing over 1,000 times, the success rate of the final glitch still couldn't get past 30%. As he was playing, he suddenly felt sleepy and fell asleep. Taitei suddenly woke up, finding himself in a strange place. As he stood up, he heard strangers whispering about the summoning being a success. They were giving thanks to a woman they called the Sky Goddess. As Taitei began to wonder where he was, a lavishly dressed lady stepped forward and introduced herself as Ida, the princess of the kingdom, the saintess of salvation. She explained that she had summoned him for the great summoning ritual from the other world, an event that only occurs once every 100 years. She pleaded with him to grant her his power and explained that the world was being threatened by the evil demon king and his 4 fiends. At that moment, Taitei suddenly realized that the princess's lines were exactly the same as the opening scene in another verse. He started to believe he might be dreaming about the game, since he had been playing it for so long. However, Taitei remembered that he always played the game in third-person mode, not first-person, because he usually got motion sickness using first-person view. He wondered if he had accidentally selected first-person mode in the settings. Strangely, he noticed that his limbs were moving according to his will, just like in real life. He decided that if this really was a dream, he would try a speedrun. Just as the princess was about to hand him the holy sword, he suddenly dashed out of the palace. The princess ordered the guards to stop him, but she was shocked to see him suddenly clip through a wall. As Taitei kept running, he realized that the first step in the speedrun was to skip the holy sword and escape the castle by clipping through the wall. He knew that he didn't even need the holy sword to defeat the bosses, and that the most important thing was to skip the tutorial event on how to use it. Back at the palace, Ida disguised herself as Danya, a commoner. She often disguised herself as Danya when she wanted to leave the palace without attracting attention. As Danya started chasing Taitei, Taitei continued with his speedrun. Along the way, he ran into Jian, a member of the capital's Adventurers Guild. Jian offered to show him how things worked around the capital, but Taitei abruptly dodged him and kept running, saying he wasn't interested. Taitei knew that skipping Jian was the hardest part of the early game, because if a player got caught by Jian's medals, the town tutorial would start. However, by performing a sidestep with precise timing, a player can avoid it completely. The timing for this is very difficult, so for the most part, new speedrunners always get stuck here. While Jian is popular with casual players, it's a time loss of at least 4 minutes if a speedrunner gets caught. Danya runs into Jian and asks if he has seen Taitei. Jian informs her that Taitei has gone out the north gate. Danya worries that Taitei might get hurt, as they had to wait 100 years for his summoning, and it would be terrible if he died. As Danya is about to leave, Jen calls out to her, his voice thick with emotion, asking if he's really that bad, because this is the first time someone has rudely ignored him like a suspicious salesman. Danya apologizes to him before leaving. Danya catches up to Taitei as he reaches the Forest of Departed Souls, but she hides behind some bushes to watch him secretly. She's shocked when Taitei suddenly starts stripping, until he's down to his underwear, grabbing a stick and running towards a horde of zombies. Danya wondered what in the world he was thinking. The situation gets worse as the zombies swarm around him and start biting him. Taitei uses the stick to smack away one zombie after another, seeming completely unaffected by their bites. He calls it intentional damage and declares that from now on he will get through this area without taking any damage. He continues running, and Danya suddenly appears from her hiding spot, demanding that he stop. She lies, claiming to be a messenger from Ida, and reminding him that he forgot the holy sword. She also warns that he needs to heal his wounds or he'll die from them. She offers to perform a healing spell on him, but Taitei runs away even faster, saying he can still make it in time. Taitei notes that the current time attack mode is on easy, and in this mode, the early game has a balancing adjustment. The less health the player has when clearing the Forest of Departed Souls, the weaker the enemies become, including the bosses. Therefore, in a time attack run, the goal is to take as much damage as possible in this area. This is why Taitei is only wearing underwear, as shirts and pants would increase his defense, which he currently needs to lower. Suddenly, Danya catches up to him again, offering to heal him. Taitei recalls that in the game, Danya was always an ally to the protagonist, but she was a hindrance in a time attack quest, so he decides to dash out of the forest at full speed. However, Danya continues to chase him, determined to heal him. Danya catches up and heals him, begging him to put on proper gear, because one of the 4 elite demons, Arachne the Puppet Master, is in the castle ahead. Taytay ignores her and runs off again. But he realizes that Danya's dialogue is different from what he remembers and wonders if he's still dreaming. Suddenly, Taytay comes face to face with Arachne's pet, a giant spider. Danya screams for him to run, knowing that he will surely die wearing only his underwear. To her surprise, Taytay begins to glitch, moving at an incredible speed. Taytay stabs the spider repeatedly with his stick, which completely astonishes Danya. Before long, the spider is sliced in two and dies. Taytay explains that this technique is called the stick glitch. By continuously hitting a mini-boss at specific points with the wooden stick, the stick's attack power glitches and is permanently multiplied by 2024. The Holy Sword only has an attack power of 60, making it far inferior to the stick. Danya is bewildered by Taytay's explanation. After defeating the spider, Taytay receives a booster potion, a red drop which he considers lucky. As the item drops, here are usually useless due to RNG. He decides to enter the castle, where he confronts Arachne, who recognizes him as the hero from another world. Arachne tells Taytay that she wants him because she's always wondered if humans from another world would make better puppets than the ones in her own world. She declares that she won't let the Demon King have him and that she will turn him into her puppet. Taytay ignores Arachne and uses a glitch to phase through the wall. Arachne wonders where he went, and one of her puppets informs her that he went through the wall. She yells at her minions, ordering them to find him. Danya proceeds to search around the wall, trying to figure out where and how Taytay phased through. Suddenly, Danya also phases through the wall and appears on the other side. Taytay keeps running, declaring that now that he has the strongest staff, he can ignore the other 3 members of the quartet and head straight for the final boss battle. Taytay recalls that beyond the wall is a frantic teleportation gate, a bug, and that jumping off the cliff will take him to the deepest part of the dungeon where the final boss battle takes place. Normally, there would be a fall detection zone there, but there's one spot where it doesn't work. Danya catches up to him and demands that he explain his plan. Since he has been messing around from the start, she reminds him that he is the hero from another world, destined to defeat the Demon King, and that if he's truly the hero of another world, he must save the world properly. Taytay tells Danya that to clear the game, he doesn't need to fight the mini-bosses. According to the rules of the game, they must minimize the time lost, which is why he'll be faster by going straight to defeating the Demon King. Taytay and Danya arrive at the target point, and they both jump off the cliff. While falling, Taytay uses a potion, and thinks about how well things are going for him. He managed to avoid Jian's tour and acquire a powerful staff. He's amazed at his progress, especially since he was biased against the first-person perspective at first. Plus, he got the chance to act cool in front of an NPC like Danya. However, he suddenly realizes that Danya's comment about him messing around wasn't part of the original game's dialogue. He starts to wonder if he can clear the game even faster and break his own record this time, but then remembers that there's no point since he's still dreaming. At exactly 15 minutes and 30 seconds, he finally meets the Demon King, Apocalypse. As Apocalypse tries to start his dialogue, Taytay immediately uses a glitch to skip it and attacks instantly. He remarks that the first part of the final boss battle requires no skill at all. He just needs to avoid the 3 tentacles and hit Apocalypse 3 times with his buffed staff. However, the final boss is very strong, and a speedrunner who maximizes attack at the cost of health would die in a single hit. As Danya watches the battle, she's astonished to see Taytay overwhelming the Demon King just 30 minutes after leaving the castle. After landing the 3rd hit, the Demon King enters his 2nd phase. Taytay tells Danya that the first phase is actually harder, because in the 2nd phase, after Apocalypse either shoots a beam or swings its tentacles 4 times, the player can clear the game by hitting the weak point on its head when it falls. However, Danya doesn't quite understand what he's explaining. Taytay then acknowledges the hardest time-saving glitch he discovered, which he personally named the Shachiku Step. He recalls failing to execute it at the RTA event, but hopes to succeed this time. He informs Danya that Apocalypse will attack in random patterns, and that using the glitch is heavily dependent on luck. So he asks her to pray for him. Praying is a common term used when a player needs their fans' support for random events or difficult techniques. Apocalypse swings its tentacles to attack Taytay, and he notes that it's a vertical attack. As expected, he predicts a horizontal attack will follow, which will allow him to perform the fastest Shachiku step. However, Apocalypse changes its attack to an unexpected pattern before switching to a horizontal strike. Taytay wonders if Danya was the reason the Demon King changed its attack pattern, speculating that her prayers might have stabilized its attacks. He decides to investigate this theory and report it to the Universe research team. As soon as he regains his senses, Taytay starts running on the walls, surprising Danya. Taytay explains that the polygon faces on the ivy vines are glitched, allowing players to run on them normally. However, the difficult part is the next step, which is stepping on a tiny falling piece of debris, only a few pixels in size, and precisely aligning his angle and timing. Frame by frame, to reach Apocalypse's weak point, Taytay successfully executes the Shachiku step, launching himself toward the Demon King, and striking its weak point, completing the quest in exactly 24 minutes and 53 seconds. Danya praises Taytay for completing the quest, and admits that she is actually Princess Ida. She reveals that upon returning to her true form, she will seal the root that the Demon King was protecting, bringing eternal peace to the world. Taitai finishes the game in the 24th minute, believing it to be the fastest run ever. He also thinks he can finish even faster next time, thanks to the glitch involving Danya that he discovered. However, he quickly realizes that the ending cutscene isn't starting. The situation gets worse when Danya announces that she's lost the ability to transform back to her normal form. Taitai is extremely worried because he knows that if Ida can't return to her true form, the game's ending cutscene won't trigger. He wonders why the game isn't ending, after he'd already beaten the final boss. Finally, he realizes he's trapped in the world of Aniverse and can't go back. Taitai and Danya return to the capital city of Falshla, and Danya goes to the tailor's shop, where the tailor, Grethrin, asks her what kind of dress she wants, and she explains that the dress isn't for her. Taitai suddenly appears through the wall and says hello. Afterward, the two go to a restaurant to eat, with Taitai now in a full adventurer's outfit, which boosts his defense. Danya warns him to avoid doing anything that would draw attention in the capital. Taitai replies that he's just acting normally, but she accuses him of lying. Taitai snaps his fingers and tells Danya he's not sure if anyone can hear them. He explains that him phasing through the wall at the tailor's shop was due to a glitch that prevents him from using doors. Based on the clear data from the glitch, he can no longer enter certain buildings through the door, which is very inconvenient, but he figures going through walls is a solution. However, Danya insists that this is a huge problem. She dismisses his talk about game glitches as nonsense. Taitai explains to Danya that she's a character in a game called Another Verse, which he is very familiar with. He knows that this explanation won't harm either of them, but he's not sure if she'll fully understand. Danya tells him that what he's saying is hard to believe, but she admits she can't deny what she's seen with her own eyes. Taitai replies that glitches are like magic. She counters that she can't confirm any consumption of magical power or any blessings from spirits, so it's clearly not magic, but rather something that transcends the logic of their world. She concludes that it must be some kind of external power. She then speculates that maybe the reason she can't turn back into Ada is because he used glitches to defeat the Demon King. However, this statement catches Taitai by surprise. He explains that he honestly thought he was dreaming. He adds that he's heard if a player uses a glitch to defeat the Demon King, the ending can bug out. However, in the thousands of times he had speedrun the game, he had never seen a glitch that prevented Ida from transforming back. Taitai knew that with the glitches he normally used, this shouldn't have happened. While the earlier wall clipping glitch was something he'd anticipated, the one involving Ida was completely out of his expectations. Therefore, he believed that he might not be the cause of what was happening. Danya told him that if what he said was true, it meant not only could she not turn back into Ida, but the method to fix everything that had happened was also far beyond his abilities. Taitai was silent for a moment, then told her he had an idea, which was to complete the game with a true ending. He explained that although a player could finish the game just by defeating the Demon King and getting the normal ending, defeating all 4 elites and fulfilling special conditions would unlock the true ending. He clarified that his explanation was still rough, but he believed the true ending would trigger a second loop, and thus, all variables in the data would be reset to normal. When the ending started, it would erase the effects caused by the glitches. Danya became even more confused by this explanation, and her head started to feel dizzy. Taitai summarized that achieving the game's true ending would erase the glitches, allowing Danya to fully transform back into Ada. He then wondered if he could return to his own world, even if Danya succeeded in transforming back into Ada. Danya told him that if she became Ada again, she could use time shift magic, just like when she summoned him. She explained that as long as he was still connected to his previous world, he would always be able to return. Then she admitted that it was wrong to drag him into their affairs, and apologized for summoning him so suddenly. However, Taitai comforted her, telling her not to feel bad, because he loved the world of Aniverse. But since he had a lot of work waiting for him at home and he wanted to compete with his friends for the record, he needed to get back quickly. He added that although he wasn't sure if this was a dream or reality, coming to Aniverse had made him very happy. Taitai told Danya that sitting still made him feel restless, because he was always speedrunning, except for the first few times he beat the game. Even now, he felt like the stopwatch was still running. After the meal, the two of them decided to go to the Adventurers Guild to gather information about recent events. Danya advised Taitai not to tell anyone about his great feats. She pointed him to the sky, where there was something that looked like a tree root, and informed him that it was the root of evil that the Monster King was protecting. She explained that all monsters were born from the source of evil and attacked humanity as incarnations of that evil. Despite having defeated the Monster King, Danya said she couldn't seal the root of evil without Ada's power, so the threat from the monster still remained. Danya stressed that until true peace was secured, they shouldn't let the people become complacent. Taitai asked if he could go into the item shop, and Danya said yes. When he tried to enter the shop through the door, but failed, he then tried to clip through the wall instead. But Danya yelled at him to stop. Taitai continued to think about how he was really inside the game Aniverse. He shifted his thoughts to how smart Danya was, noticing that even when he mumbled about meta-related things, she seemed to understand him. He also remarked that her way of speaking was very flexible, unlike an NPC. He remembered telling her they should aim for the true ending of the story, but he realized that this assumption was based on the premise that this world operated just like the game. He began to wonder if he was in a different place entirely, rather than inside the game. As they continued on their way, they saw a guard riding a giant bird-like creature, flying and blowing a horn. The soldier announced that a flying monster, called a wyvern, possessing the power to corrode magic, had broken through the barrier and was heading for the city. He ordered everyone to flee and hide. Soon, the dragon-like wyvern reached the main city and began its attack. Just as Danya was about to gather her magical power, she was surprised to see the wyvern caught in an explosion. She was even more surprised when she found out that Taitei was the one who had defeated the wyvern, with just an ordinary slingshot and a pair of firecrackers. In a matter of seconds, Taitei explained that the slingshot he bought from the item shop helped him win easily. He said that the city being attacked by the wyvern was a recurring event that happened every time a player entered the capital for the second time. Having done the normal challenges before he started speedrunning, he was familiar with both the fixed and main events. He detailed how he had used rapid vibrating movements to perform a swift attack and defeat the monster in a single blow. Danya cut him off, scolding him for using game glitches so openly. Taitei defended his actions, suggesting that eliminating the threat quickly was necessary to prevent any danger. However, the passers-by on the street had witnessed his unusual movements and began to whisper about how strange they were for a human. Suddenly, the tailor appeared and identified Taitei as the person who had walked through his shop's wall earlier. The onlookers wondered about this, prompting the tailor to recount how Taitei had come to his shop wearing only his underwear and paper clothes. The villagers started pointing at Taitei, claiming he had to be a monster. Danya held everyone back, saying that they needed to calm down. But they didn't understand how that could be possible, believing the wyvern must have also been part of Taitei's plot, since no human could vibrate the way he did. Danya panicked. Of course they'd be suspicious. It was all because of Taitei's glitches. An old woman stepped forward and told them to stop being paranoid. She said that the person they were confronting was actually the hero from another world. They must have forgotten so quickly that an announcement was made long ago in the castle, stating that Iida had summoned a hero after 100 years with power beyond human comprehension. Looking at Taitei now, perhaps he was that very hero from another world. Taitei stepped up to confirm the title, saying that the old woman was right. However, the townspeople still didn't believe it. They still thought he must be a demon, pretending to be a hero to trick them. They told the old woman that she shouldn't be fooled. The old woman, furious, snapped back that Taitei was definitely not a monster. She knew one when she saw one, and Taitei was not one of them. Her homeland had been taken over by monsters. Her younger sister was killed by a monster right before her eyes, and her sister's face was burned off when she was just a little girl. Thinking about all of that now, she shivered and continued speaking. The shock she endured from being tortured back then had awakened a skill in her, the ability to distinguish between monsters and humans. And again, what she could say for certain was that the young man standing before them didn't carry any of the brutal aura that monsters usually had. The old woman acknowledged Taitei's presence in a different way than the scornful villager. She took Taitei's hand and said that she had been waiting for him. The old woman didn't want to be afraid anymore and hoped Taitei could bring them a world without monsters. The old woman's wish fit the scenario, because her village had been occupied 50 years ago by one of the Demon King's 4 generals, Arachne. It seemed there had been a terrible slaughter, but since then, it had remained under Arachne's control. They could only speculate on the true death toll. The old woman's story certainly fit the setting of Aniverse. However, it was more heart-wrenching than what had happened in the game. Staring as if through a screen, Taitei couldn't think of anything to say, even though this was a scene he had played through so many times. There are many people on the continent living in similar circumstances. As long as the roots of evil are not sealed away, that number will continue to grow. Danya said this because she wanted Taitei to defeat the Demon King. However, she herself had not yet completed her own mission. She felt powerless, burdened by the challenge of salvation. Taitei didn't think Danya had any reason to feel so down on herself, because she was still the one saving him. And he didn't just mean in the game. Danya always had his back, like a real hero. When he saw something like a dark dungeon, like something out of a horror game, it was terrifying at first. But knowing that Danya was always by his side, this helped him reduce his fear a great deal, and even in the current situation, he could still remain calm. Because Danya was always by his side. He considers himself Danya's #1 fan because he loves her so much. In fact, in the fan rankings, Danya always held the #1 spot, while Iida was ranked 8th, so Danya could be sure there was no way she was less valuable than Iida. Danya was shocked by this popularity ranking. How could a hero like Iida only be ranked 8th? Taitei went on to say that from what he'd checked today, he knew he could use all these glitches, just like in the game, so this world was definitely running on the same program as Aniverse. He wanted to go to the Adventurers Guild tomorrow, and Danya needed him to clarify what he was talking about, because it felt like he was abusing everything for no reason. He explained that she would definitely be able to become Iida again, but first, they needed to save the world by achieving the true ending. The two of them celebrated with a high five, but Danya wanted to know why she was stuck with the name he'd given her, and he explained that it was a conversational habit in the otaku community. At the Adventurers Guild, when it was announced that a level 4 wyvern had been wounded by erosion magic, Jean received a report that the number of casualties and material damage was 0, which angered him and made him act aggressively toward the messenger, claiming they had been negligent in their investigation. Naya walked in, wanting to know what all the noise in the capital was about. A member of Ida's guild, Ida's Shield, named Hyen, was present when Taitei and Danya entered the guild. He stood there as if he'd been waiting for them, ready to deliver some cliché line about how bold they were to show up at this guild. especially after ignoring him yesterday. Anyway, he hoped they were ready. Tay-Tay apologized for what happened before, humbly saying that Jean had done nothing wrong and that it was just a natural reflex. This confused Jian, so Tay-Tay went on to explain that just seeing Jean's face always brought his own past mistakes to mind. Jean grew even more confused, wondering what past mistake Tay-Tay was talking about. Tay-Tay waved it off, saying it was irrelevant and Jean could just pretend he never heard it. Right from the start, Jean had an internal monologue, wondering why seeing his face reminded Tay-Tay of something he regretted. Perhaps someone very important to Tay-Tay was attacked by a monster right before his eyes. Jean's face might have reminded Tay-Tay of someone like his older brother. Maybe he blamed himself for being too naive, unable to protect his brother in the past. These feelings caused Tay-Tay even more anguish. Meanwhile, Jean apologized and said that he wasn't sure what was going on, but Tay-Tay could think of him as an older brother if he wanted. Danya understood there was definitely a misunderstanding between the two, but she knew she shouldn't interfere. Moving on to more pressing matters, they decided to meet with Guildmaster Nia. However, the Guildmaster wasn't present and was most likely seeking permission to confront the 4 great stars. It seemed there was also a hero from another world who had appeared. Jean asked if they were going to register with the guild, and Tay-Tay nodded, confirming that he would need to do so. Jean welcomed them to Isekai'd, where the guild's headquarters was located. Here, Marone, the receptionist, guided them and explained that the Isekai'd Adventurers Guild in the capital city of Falshla was the central body that managed all the adventurers' guilds in the entire kingdom. Although there were adventurers' guilds in every city, Isekai'd served as the central hub for the whole system. Marone gave them registration medals and explained that with these medals, they could accept quests in all cities, including the capital. By completing quests, they would be able to rank up and take on more difficult missions. Normally, they would have to take a test to register, but this time it was waived thanks to Danya's recommendation. Jean remarked that they were lucky because the guild's exam was really difficult. True to its name, the Isekai'd Adventurers Guild was backed by Queen Ida, so their reputation was top-notch. Possessing a registration medal from the guild also meant being exempt from customs inspections in any city. These were all valuable benefits for Tay-Tay, although he already knew everything since he was a true Aniverse otaku and had read the official guide thoroughly. Jian continued to boast that life in their guild was great, with relatively high quest rewards. And the best part was that once a year, Queen Ida herself would come to encourage the guild members. In fact, some people only joined the guild just to get a chance to see Queen Ida. Danya added that since Isekai'd was practically the central defense force of the capital, it was only fitting to honor the queen. However, Marone cut in, declaring that there was no way Ida would ever be with someone like Jean, so he'd better stop daydreaming. She also reminded him that they were in the middle of registering new members, and she didn't want to be bothered by his baseless fantasies. Tay-Tay thought to himself that the dialogue between the characters in this world was now even more realistic than in the game. Aniverse had built its NPC settings with an almost abnormal level of detail. It was this meticulous attention to detail that brought such liveliness and a strong sense of immersion. Even the side quests at the guild felt like you were truly immersing yourself in this world, rather than just doing a job. This was also ideal from the perspective of hardcore players. Tay-Tay felt a shiver of excitement from his desire to speedrun, but Aniverse was so captivating that he couldn't help but enjoy it. Mirone told him to hold out his hand in front of the crystallization device and asked for his name. Tay-Tay gave his name, and Jean remarked that it was a rare name. Mirone thought the name was refreshing and noted his unique mixed-race appearance. The name Tay-Tay had used for his speedrun streams was registered on the device, and from what they could see, he was currently only at level 1. The method for leveling up would be explained in detail later. In the meantime, they continued the registration process, and Mirone needed Jean's help to complete it. Danya asked Tay-Tay if he had ever defeated the Demon King while still at level 1. Tay-Tay confirmed that he had, thanks to a speedrun route. However, Danya seemed more annoyed than pleased to hear about the topic of speedrunning again. In Aniverse, speedrunning is known as the Great Revolution. Speedrunning is about finishing a game as fast as possible, usually playing alone. While it might seem like a harsh competition on the surface, to Tay-Tay, it's actually a team sport. Although players compete for rankings against rivals, they still share information like tips for discovering glitches or new optimization methods. Since Aniverse is a globally popular game, there are about 500 speedrunners worldwide and around 30 in Japan. The rule for an any % speedrun in Aniverse is to defeat the final boss as quickly as possible, regardless of how much content or how many side quests you skip. However, the final boss has an immense amount of HP and power, making the challenge of defeating the Demon King with minimal equipment the central focus of every any % speedrun. Initially, when players still leveled up properly, the minimum time was about 8 hours. On this route, they could still use the Holy Sword. After a while, they realized it was much faster to skip the normal route. Find a weapon with the highest attack stat, and then just pour damage onto the Demon King. This approach, which involved just enough grinding to get past the Demon King's castle gate, cut the time down to about 4 hours. Later, they discovered glitches like clipping through walls to enter Arachne's castle or a mysterious warp straight to the final boss room. Despite finding many interesting glitches, the 2-hour barrier remained a massive challenge that no one could overcome. Then suddenly, like a comet appearing out of nowhere, they found a broken weapon with an attack power of 1024, known as the Strange Stick. This was a major game-breaking bug, first discovered 3 years after the game's release, and Tay-Tay wanted to show Danya the massive impact this discovery had on the Aniverse research group. Thanks to the power of friendly competition and the overpowered strange stick, they could defeat the Demon King in 25 minutes, even while at level 1. Even so, the game's difficulty skyrocketed, because not leveling up made it much easier for the Demon King to wipe them out. To be honest, Danya didn't understand a single thing that was just explained, and perhaps neither did we. However, at that moment, Kira Isekai'd, the strongest warrior of the Aniverse Kingdom, appeared and chose them for a special mission. Taitei had never encountered her during his speedruns, so it felt like it had been a very long time since he'd seen this character. Despite that, her character design still sparked the usual debates about practicality and an over-the-top style. Taitei was happy that Kira Isekai'd was so captivating, even just through a screen. But now that she was right in front of him, his feelings were more complex than simple fascination. However, seeing the way Taitei was staring at her, Danya misunderstood and wanted to clarify that he didn't mean any harm, just to be sure. Danya also wanted to clear up her relationship with Kira. Kira is Ada's best friend and one of the few people who knows Danya's true identity. Moroni noticed that Kira seemed to be in a bad mood, and Jen wondered if going to the castle was the reason she was so upset. Kira asked Danya about the man beside her, and Taitei introduced himself, saying that from this day forward, he would be a member of the guild and a hero from another world. Now, Jin understood who Taitei was, and Miron also realized why his level had caused so much confusion. Kira called him a coward from another world, especially after seeing his level 1 status. She had heard the story long ago at the castle. Although Ida had succeeded in summoning a hero, that hero lost his nerve and fled, failing to complete his mission and even leaving the holy sword behind. Danya stepped in as Kira, also known as Nya, was saying those things, and she insisted that Kira was mistaken. Kira didn't want Danya to start making excuses for these people from another world. She declared that the guild didn't need a weak level 1, nor did it need cowards, and demanded a duel to prove that Taitei was truly a hero. Moroni and Jean were terrified by the rising hostility, and felt they had to stop it. But Kira told them not to worry. She would use a wooden stick and go easy on Taitei. Jean begged Kira not to do it, but she wouldn't listen. She even taunted Taitei because of the staff he carried instead of a sword, something she was very proud of. Taitei insisted that if he backed down, he wouldn't be a man, despite Danya's protests. With an attack power of 1024, the bizarre staff had slain the Demon King. If used on a human, the consequences would be catastrophic. Danya pleaded with Taitei, telling him that Kira was her best friend, and Taitei promised to sort things out right away. Before the match began, Danya burst into tears for her friend, Kira. Kira teased that she thought Taitei would have run away by now, especially since he was still holding that staff between his legs. Taitei joked back that he didn't have a tail, so at least Kira had to acknowledge his courage. But now it was time to get serious. Kira's signature skill was the goddess's blessing, called Valkyrie Sweet Etude. Upon using this skill, her armor turned white, making Moroni and Jean worried. This was a special skill, bestowed by the goddess to enhance human abilities. It doubled her power and speed. Simple, but effective. Although Kira's swordsmanship was superhuman, it was clear Taitei was on another level. No matter how many lives Kira had, she could never win. Danya screamed, begging her friend to stop, but Kira just told her to stop whining. Asking why she was so attached to this weakling, instantly, Taitei lunged forward, closing the distance in a single moment. Kira reacted quickly, trying to move faster. But in an instant, he was overtaken and thrown against the wall. Taitei looked defeated, about to collapse. Jean hurried off to get a potion, while Miron told Danya how to care for Taitei. Kira remarked that it was a disappointing sight, and Taitei explained that it was a forced loss event. In gaming terms, a forced loss event is a pre-programmed event, meaning no matter how hard you try, you have to lose for plot reasons. In this case, choosing the dialogue option to admit to Kira that you're an adventurer from another world during your first meeting at the Adventurers Guild triggers this event. From a speedrunning perspective, the fastest option is to approach Kira within the first 4 frames and use a powerful attack to take her down. After recovering, Danya expressed her disappointment that Taitei didn't actually attack her friend with the bizarre staff. Taitei reassured Danya that for an important friend like Kira, he couldn't just hurt her right in front of her. That's why he had to acknowledge their friendship. Moroni rushed back with the potion, but found Taitei miraculously, fully recovered, so it seemed he didn't need it anymore. Kira also asked if Taitei lost on purpose, pointing out that he had completely seen through her move. If he hadn't, he wouldn't have been able to react to it. Anyone who could do that would have to be on her level, or an even stronger warrior. Kira felt she needed to understand why, and this led to a dialogue not present in the game. Taitei was flustered, unable to say it was to save time. So he told her that he had no reason to defeat Kira because she wasn't his enemy. They are friends, the ones who will defeat the Demon King together. Kira decided not to warm up to Taitei right away, just to tease him a little. They both apologized for their earlier rude behavior. Taitei suggested it would be nice if they could become friends. Kira decided she would try to cooperate with him from now on, and she told Danya as much. Kira then asked about what Danya wanted to say earlier and asked them to come to her room together. Jean wanted to follow, but Kira, as the leader, wanted them to get back to their duties. However, she had one piece of advice. The world is placing its faith in the hero from another world to defeat the Demon King. The people in Ada have high expectations for him. But Kira, as someone born in this world, has her own pride. She had dedicated her entire life to sword training since she was 5 years old, forgoing the life of a noble to pursue this ideal. Kira was determined to be the one to defeat the Demon King. Tay revealed that he had already defeated the Demon King, which shocked Kira to her core. She thought it was just some cruel joke and couldn't believe he could have done it so quickly. Danya confirmed the battle ended yesterday, just 25 minutes after Tay was summoned. Tay explained the concept of speedrunning from his world, where competitions focus on defeating the Demon King as fast as possible. All of this sounded completely absurd to Kira, and she told Danya that Tay must be insane. Kira was devastated, but she knew Danya wouldn't lie about the Demon King being defeated, which made her realize the significance of some recent events. Danya asked about this incident, and Kira explained that right after the hero summoning ritual ended, a roar came from Castle Arachne in the north. It's a fairly close location, and the news reached the capital through reports from the Red Lion Squad. Arachne's spider familiars have been spotted, apparently searching for something among the Demon King's 4 great guardians. Arachne, known for her cruel and cunning nature, has been killing to satisfy her cruelty for the past 50 years. Those she kills become her puppets, controlled by her threads and poison. What's even more terrifying is that those under Arachne's control will involuntarily awaken their skills. While Kira awakened her desired skills through sword training, people can awaken skills in extreme situations. And thanks to the goddess's blessing, these skills can range from legendary to common. Arachne specifically targets beautiful girls to awaken their skills, creating special puppets from those who possess superior abilities. Tay realized that the old woman who could communicate with monsters might have been one of Arachne's victims 50 years ago. She was lucky not to become a puppet, but she was still deeply affected. All of this is truly disgusting. Stepping outside the capital in Aniverse is like seeing a world ruled by cruel monsters, where humans must live in bondage to them. The 4 great guardians possess immense power and only obey the strongest Demon King. But if the Demon King has already been defeated, Kira doesn't know what will happen next. She believes that if they don't act quickly, the situation will become complicated. Especially since Arachne's base is on the outskirts of the capital, coupled with her hot-headed and rash nature. Compared to other powerful enemies, they sent spies yesterday, but Arachne could attack faster than they can report back. Maybe even tomorrow. Kira feared they couldn't delay another minute. They would have to deploy the royal army today or tomorrow at the latest. But first, they need to convince the elders. Tay, who was very excited, suggested they should strike before Arachne gets to them, proposing an immediate confrontation. He started trembling, which confused Kira, but Danya understood why. He was trembling with the desire to do a speed run. He explained that he holds the world record in the true ending category and has never had to reset against Arachne, with his split times always under 15 minutes. Danya asked him to explain it more simply, and he clarified. If they do a speed run in the confrontation with Arachne, they could defeat her in just 15 minutes. This sounded unbelievable to Kira. But he went on to explain that, given the current circumstances, they needed to prioritize safety over time. But he would need Kira's help. Even though Kira couldn't make any sense of his plan, Danya pleaded with her best friend to trust him. Although she didn't fully agree, Kira decided she would trust this strange boy. She announced they needed to prepare properly, and said she was heading to the tailor shop and the item shop near Arachne's castle. Although Arachne's cruel acts against humans were horrific. Tay, however, was unfazed, daydreaming as he cheerfully strolled down the street, carefree as had become his recent habit. Kira and Danya were both confused by Tay's actions. Right now, he, the hero from another world, was digging for gems in abandoned scale ore mines to find luster scale ore, instead of just breaking rocks like they were used to. He finally found an ore and informed them they were ready to start the race. The next day, Danya wondered just how many rocks she destroyed when she could have just kept digging. Tay confused them even more with his explanation, saying that finding luster scale ores used to be much easier before the update. Kira, with her usual serious expression, pointed out that luster scale ore was rarely useful for crafting weapons, and could only be sold for a high price when used for decoration. Just then, an Orthrus, a 2-headed wolf, suddenly emerged from the bushes and moved in to attack them. Kira readied her fighting stance against the monster, but to her surprise, she didn't need to help, as Tay swung his wooden staff and defeated the monster in just a single blow. Tay noted, however, that he wasn't a fan of having to deal with monsters at night. Kira was stunned, unable to believe her eyes that Tay had defeated the monster with a single swing of his staff, which wasn't even considered a proper weapon. She acknowledged that this must be the overwhelming power of a hero from another world. Tay suggested they should head back to the Adventurers Guild right away, but Kira pointed out that he had forgotten to take the magic stone from the monster he just defeated. She explained that in this world, people raise their level by purifying magic stones taken from defeated monsters. Danya also remarked that Tay hadn't taken the magic stones from the monsters he'd beaten before either. Kira, despite acknowledging Tay's impressive combat skills, insisted he still needed to level up more. She reminded Tay of how he had recklessly challenged Arachne when he was only level 1, telling him he wasn't ready for a challenge like that. Tay explained that he didn't collect the magic stones because he thought it would slow down his speedrun. However, since he wasn't aiming for a speedrun anymore, he decided to explain it to them more clearly. He took the magic stone from the Orthrus, the monster he had just defeated, and everything seemed normal to his friends. But Tay revealed that the problem was the long cutscene when collecting magic stones. He explained that collecting the stone takes 32 seconds, and even if you skip the scene, the data loading still takes about another 10 seconds. Tay pointed out that in a speedrun, time is critical, so he couldn't stop to collect magic stones and level up. Danya asked about the wyvern, and Taitei admitted he probably could have gotten a magic stone from it, but he'd just gotten into the habit of skipping them. Even so, Danya and Kira still found both his words and his actions hard to understand. However, Kira noticed that Danya's voice sounded like she was having fun, which reminded her of their childhood days. Danya quickly changed the subject and suggested they prepare for the attack on Arachne. A while later, at the Adventurers Guild, Taitei went to purify the magic stone to level up. Everyone praised him for being able to take down such a strong monster while only being at level 1. Afterward, they began the process of purifying the magic stone in the purification device and crystal solution. Magic stones contain great power but also carry a toxic miasma. If someone absorbs too much, they can turn into a monster, which is why the stones must be purified before use. The wyvern from their previous encounter had absorbed a magic stone and turned into a monster. Creatures higher up the food chain are more susceptible to becoming monsters. However, once the stone is refined, people can safely level up. Taitei went from level 1 to level 4 after absorbing the refined stone. Although he admitted that watching the cutscene was interesting, he still thought it was way too long. Kira announced that it was time to test the special skill that Taitei had been granted, as it was the only thing she could rely on if she were to let him join the next quest. Otherwise, his affection level would be too low for him to go with them. According to legend, the hero from another world is granted a special skill to defeat the Demon King. Normally, they would check the granted skill right after the summoning, but Taitei was a special case since he ran away. However, Kira announced she would check Taitei's skill this time, using a high-level appraisal spell. Everyone around was buzzing with excitement as they prepared to discover the skill the hero possessed. Meanwhile, Taitei wasn't very excited because he already knew how many skills he was supposed to have. Right now, it was 0. He knew that in the original game, the hero was programmed to have no skills at first, which disappointed the crowd after all their high expectations. And the hero could only unlock skills after defeating the 4 elite squads, as being weak in the early game was a common trope. So, Taitei hesitated, not wanting to disappoint his new NPC friends by letting them appraise him. Unexpectedly, they found a skill, but it was written in a strange language they could only guess was from another world. They tried to write it down and transcribe it, but it didn't translate into anything meaningful. Taitei admitted that the characters looked like text from his world, but even he couldn't translate or copy it. He wondered if this was because he had defeated the Demon King using only glitches. Kira couldn't wait any longer and revealed that this latest development meant she had to go defeat Arachne alone. The next day, everyone was surprised, and they were even more shocked when she revealed that she hadn't gotten permission from the elders, but had decided to go alone anyway. They tried to convince her not to do it, but then Kira revealed that a great danger was approaching the capital, and she had to stop it. At the very least, she could push Arachne back, if not defeat it entirely. Danya tried to stop her, but Kira revealed she still didn't trust Taitei enough, given his low level, even after today's expedition. They only managed to get 1 shining scale, and the nature of Taitei's was still unclear, so Kira couldn't trust him or his methods to guarantee victory. However, she revealed that she had been watching Taitei for half a day, just for Danya's sake. Meanwhile, Taitei cut in, saying he had a strategy. He proposed that if they combined their strength, Arachne could be easily defeated. The others were amazed that Taitei spoke so casually about defeating Arachne. Meanwhile, Taitei said that his strategy involved more than just a wooden stick. This time, he said that what they lacked in levels, they could make up for with overwhelming power, or money. Jian remembered the mercenary quests and suggested they hire some S-rank parties. He also pointed out that they could sell the Shining Scale, which was worth 10,000 sen. Danya cut in, reminding them that the money they could earn would only be enough to hire a B-rank team, not an S-rank one. Kira slowly started to accept the plan, but she stressed that they couldn't use the guild's money or even her own, because the elders might find out about their actions. Taitei grinned mischievously and said that money wasn't a problem for him. He asked them to keep what was about to happen a secret, because he was going to show them his otherworldly power. He took out the Shining Scale and a slingshot, then repeatedly equipped and unequipped the scale from the slingshot. He did this over and over while shaking it until the scale disappeared. He revealed that he had just created a phantom slingshot and took the scale out of his inventory, revealing thousands of scales, 999 of them to be exact. He suggested they could sell these scales to earn more money. Danya, although impressed, pointed out that this could send the market into a frenzy. But Taitei said that it was the scales that increased, not the money. He compared what he did to them finding a new mine. Meanwhile, Kira could only remain silent. Kira observed the ores and how perfectly they were formed. They all looked real. She began to understand what Taitei meant when he said he had a strategy. Taitei and his companions headed to the Merchant Guild headquarters to exchange the ore for money. The cashier was surprised by the amount of ore they brought in. She checked to see if they were fake, but her magnifying glass showed they were all real. She asked the cashier to bring out 990,000 sen for the exchange, which was almost all the gold they had, plus the consignment deposit. In the end, they succeeded in receiving the full value for the ore. Meanwhile, Taitei was getting antsy about how long the transaction was taking, as he considered it a waste of time. He took the money, strapped it to his back, and dashed off, leaving his companions behind. He had lost 3 minutes and 15 seconds up to this point. Fortunately, running with the money was easy for him, because they had prepared the day before, buying some gear from a street vendor. Kira and Danya muttered from behind, talking about how Taitei always left them behind without explaining his plan. Meanwhile, a messenger bird dropped down with a message, announcing that a powerful S-rank party was now at the North Square. It was the Silver Dragonfang Party. They seemed to be stars in the eyes of the common people, with everyone asking for autographs. Aliha, the mage, revealed that their autographs cost 100 sen each. Meanwhile, Lutal, the tribal survivor, went for 1,000 sen. She also revealed that each handshake cost 10,000 sen. At this point, the group just looked like they were showing off. Mashamu, the party leader, reminded her that they were not performers. He asked for Taitei to be brought to them, as they were very keen to recruit him for their party. He told them to lead him to Taitei, and the whole group set off. However, something got in their way. Another group appeared, looking identical to the Silver Dragonfang party that everyone was familiar with. In reality, these were just monsters, who were disguised as the party members. The real members of the Silver Dragonfang party revealed that this wasn't the first time they had been replaced by imposters, and they drove the demonic beasts away, knowing that their reputation would quickly be tarnished if they let them continue. Aliha extended a hand to help a fallen man, who would inadvertently lead the monsters to Taitei, and she assured him that she wouldn't charge for a handshake. The party members turned to an old woman and thanked her for helping them spot the fakes. Mashamu was surprised that she could see through the demonic beasts, but also praised her quick thinking in silently exposing them. The old woman said she was terrified of demonic beasts. Every time she encountered them, even to this day, they wondered what kind of trauma a non-adventurer must have gone through to become like that. Mashamu assured her that they would defeat the demonic beasts along with the hero. In fact, if everything went according to plan, they might not need much help from the hero. Meanwhile, at that very moment, Taitei and his teammates were on their way to Arachne Castle, as they were tired of running. Taitei suggested they perform some tumble because a proper tumble would double their running speed. However, he also mentioned that most speedrunners get tendinitis, which led to it being banned in speedrun competitions. Once again, Kira couldn't completely understand Taitei. The more she was around him, the more of a mystery he became. Back to 11 years ago, at the royal castle, a young Kira screamed, begging everyone not to take Ida away. She was the eldest daughter of Duke Lakifika, while Ida was the first princess. The priest demanded that Kira address Ida with respect, but she insisted they were friends, so there was nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, the head priest explained that Ida was the saintess of salvation, and had to be taken for training to ensure she was ready for the day of the hero summoning. Kira refused, knowing the priest often bullied Ida during her training. They explained that the beatings were to temper her spirit. Summoning a hero from another world wasn't just some child's play. It would require Ida to stay awake for 10 days straight to meditate, and she had to be trained to do so. The priest revealed that the hero could only be summoned once every 100 years, when the stars of both worlds align. They would enter a dark age for the next 100 years. They respected Kira's father, as he was second only to the royal family, but they still insisted on taking Ida's way. However, Kira pointed out that they were just relying on summoning someone from another world, when they could just defeat the demon lord themselves. The head priest shook his head, saying that Kira was just an ignorant 8-year-old girl, and that she didn't have the same skills as Ida. Unexpectedly, Kira bravely disarmed someone in the garden, taking his sword. She swore on her family's honor that she would become the best swordsman in this world and defeat the demon lord herself. Still, this didn't stop the priest from taking Ida away. Kira continued with her promise, learning swordsmanship from her grandfather. She went on to achieve impressive feats, and even received the Lakifika armor at the age of 18, something only the strongest swordsman was allowed to wear. Kira had become the greatest saintess in history, but her battle wasn't over, not even after the demon lord's death. Back in the present, Kira knew that she was just a child back then, and only now did she understand the heavy burden Ida had to carry. She wanted to share a part of that burden. At the same time, she realized they had passed the North Square, where they were supposed to meet the S-rank party. Taitei just smirked as he revealed he never said they needed an S-rank party. He said he didn't want to mention it because of Jian. He continued to run, and his companions followed. Back to 50 years ago, Lauren and her little sister Norin were getting ready to go up the mountain to pick strawberries. While their guardian allowed it, he reminded them that the village chief had warned them to be careful of the demonic beasts outside the village, because the villagers didn't want to lose their 2 most beautiful girls. While on the mountain, Norin asked her sister about her interest in the hero from another world. She revealed that she had read stories of his past adventures, and she was eager to accompany him. Lauren didn't say much. She reminded Norin that her body was frail. However, Noran revealed that she had also read about special skills, about how people were blessed for training hard with their skills, making adventures easier. Lauren admired her sister's confidence, but she also reminded her that they would both grow old before the next hero appeared. Meanwhile, the smell of smoke began to fill the air. They looked down from the mountain and saw their village being attacked by spider demon beasts. They panicked, but they both tried to calm down to figure out their next move. However, a demon beast cut their planning short. Blocking their path, the demon beast called Lauren trash and struck her down, injuring her right eye. Lauren, though barely conscious, could still hear her sister's screams as she was killed by the demon beast for her skills. Shortly after, Lauren woke up in her house. Back in the present, this was the old woman who could see through demon beasts. 50 years had passed, but that event still haunted her. Meanwhile, Taitei and his friends arrived at the present-day village of Tadanka, now known as Spider's Trail. This was the village where Norin and Lauren had lived. Taitei informed everyone that he planned to pass through here instead of the dead forest, since they had the strange staff. Kira was aware of the events that had occurred here 50 years ago, and she knew that people were forbidden from entering Arachne's territory, no matter the reason. However, she also noticed that the village didn't seem deserted. Although there were no people, it looked as if the villagers had been here not long ago. Danya pointed towards Tai, who was jogging ahead. And he told everyone to keep up, as this might be the most difficult part of the subjugation, even though Arachne's castle was still quite far away. They soon encountered a few of Arachne's minions. Kira prepared to fight, but Tai told her to save her skills for the real battle. He intended to pass through without fighting, and told them to watch and copy his movements. Tai had mastered the spider's fixed movements, so he dodged them effectively. Kira and Danya managed to do the same, but the spider still chased after them. At this point, Tai said it was time for them to throw the gold coins at them. Throwing the money proved to be an effective way to damage the enemies and stop their pursuit. As the spiders were attracted to the gold coins, Tai simply threw the gold coins into the air. Perhaps this was why he needed so many gold coins. Tai praised them for being fast runners, and Kira was confused as to why she was being praised just for being able to run. She started to reconsider, and wondered if everything was just a game to Tai. Flashing back to one day earlier at the Demon King's throne, Morphemet, the Demon King's daughter, summoned the 4 mighty warriors. She summoned the spider, the bloodstained duke, and the hungering swamp. She intended to avenge her father's death by killing the hero from another world and taking his head. The 4 mighty warriors appeared. From the Purgatory Gate, a magical portal connecting their bases to the Round Table. Arachne, the Spider Queen, arrived late, and the others teased her about it. Brams, the Bloody Duke, and Raspy, the Hungry Swamp, spoke words that unsettled her. It seemed the 4 mighty warriors didn't always see eye to eye from the very moment they arrived. They started screaming and hurling insults at each other until Morphemet intervened. She reminded them of the reason for their meeting, which was the death of the Demon King. She spoke fondly of her father. Then, strangely, she told them that the hero had only been summoned yesterday and had defeated the Demon King that very same day. The Demon King's sudden death was too unbelievable, so Morphemet showed them the scene of his demise through the mirror of Death's eyes, a mirror that reflects the events one wishes to witness just before death. Before his death, the mirror showed Tai dodging all of the Demon King's attacks as if it were child's play, then counterattacking and ending the battle with just 3 strikes. To make it even more humiliating, they discovered that Tai had used a wooden stick instead of the holy sword. Morphemet declared this act unforgivable and promised to kill the hero in the worst way imaginable. Meanwhile, she noted that Arachne remained silent and seemed to be contemplating something. Morphemet asked Arachne what was troubling her, but the Spider Queen insisted it was nothing. In reality, it was far from nothing. Arachne secretly hated Morphemet and only obeyed her because she was the daughter of the Demon King. The meeting concluded, and they returned to their own castles. At Arachne's castle, she expressed her desire to obtain the power of the hero from the other world. With that power, she thought she could finally destroy Morphemet, as well as Raspy and Brams, whom she had always found to be a nuisance. She intended to turn Tai into her puppet. Arachne admired the skill Tai used to finish the Demon King, considering it legendary. She revealed that she knew exactly how to obtain that power for herself. Despite her hatred for men, she had to make Tai her puppet. The skill she wanted was Karna Kavacha, which could make her defense invincible, rendering her immune to attack from anyone. She thought that no matter how powerful Tai weapon was, it was still just a physical attack, and would therefore have to yield to her defense. If only the shield could have turned into a spear, she could have defeated the Demon King herself. However, she knew she would still have her chance to rule the world by capturing Tai and making him her puppet. Arachne recalled how long she had been forced to serve the Demon King, but things would be different from now on. She intended to become the new Demon King. Arachne looked around and didn't see any of her subordinates. She wondered where they were, as she still had orders to give. She went down into the castle to order them to capture the hero from the other world. However, the greatest surprise came when she saw Tai standing right in front of her, after only 12 minutes and 35 seconds. Tai was improving at an incredible rate. Arachne wanted power, so she had to either seize it or be killed. Just then, Kira confronted Arachne directly, along with Arachne's Elite Four, who were confident they would defeat her without a doubt. Before entering the battle with Arachne, the group gathered with Tai and determined that Arachne would unleash an endless wave of small spiders. These spiders would attack them, leaving them unable to defend themselves while attacking Arachne. Kira's job was to clear out these small spiders with her area of effect attacks. Kira didn't mind focusing on this task, but she wondered if they could win cleanly and safely. Danya reassured them that they had already defeated the Demon Lord, who was stronger than Arachne, based on the health of the Wyvern in the capital and their encounter with Orthrus in the outskirts. Although normally only low-level magical beasts would appear, and based on the previous appearance pattern of the spiders, despite the ease of defeating them, the magical beasts might have been changed to be very difficult because they had defeated the Demon Lord without taking any damage. In short, right now, Arachne was stronger than the Demon Lord they had defeated. Yes, this wasn't what they expected to hear, but Tai calmly soothed them by saying that the speedrun route had been prepared with that in mind. This meant they couldn't kill her in one hit, as Arachne had a pretty high amount of health. They needed to attack multiple times to defeat her for sure. Clearing out the low-level magical beast was a prerequisite, and that was why Tai had brought Kira along. Arachne walked down the stairs, chuckling that she didn't expect them to make it this far. She was delighted to meet the hero from another world, and had no intention of letting him escape. She was even excited about the new toys he brought with him, and she firmly declared she would turn them all into her puppets. If Kira were to be hit first, she would collapse to her knees, unable to move, stunned. Arachne started with an intimidation attack right from the beginning, with only a 5% success rate, an unlucky move for the hero's party. Tite tossed something into Danya's hand, which was a mana-restoring vial, a purple potion. The plan was that while Kira recovered, she would clear out the low-level magical beast with this purple potion. Tite had calculated that Danya would have barely enough mana for this, but Danya assured him that she was prepared. Arachne mentioned that she didn't know what their plan was, but that it was just a futile struggle. She didn't stop Danya from unleashing her Nekomata fire skill, a spell that uses magical power to attack with fireballs, and this was Danya's main AoE skill. Meanwhile, Tite said that Kira wasn't completely free from the stun effect yet. Tite asked her not to look away from the situation, because this was the final part of the Arachne slaying speedrun. Arachne mentioned that she was protected by Karna Kavacha, her defensive skill. It was an extremely inviolable skill, of the legendary class, capable of nullifying all attacks, whether physical, magical, or spiritual, and it was her strongest skill. She was certain that the hero from another world would not make it out alive. Perhaps Arachne should have talked less and paid more attention, because Tite was already attacking with coins. The worrying thing was that Arachne's defensive skill was inviolable, as no attack could be effective, whether physical, magical, or spiritual. The strange staff couldn't be used here. But to Danya, it seemed like a way to escape from the enemy, and she didn't consider it an attack. He countered that even though it wasn't an attack, in the Aniverse game system, throwing money is not classified as an attack, and therefore is not affected by Karna Kavacha. In this game, throwing money is a special action that allows you to damage enemies by throwing money and guarantees an escape from them. Since Arachne is a boss battle, you can't run away even if you throw money. However, this could be exploited because they couldn't run, meaning they could throw money as many times as they wanted. They could take advantage of the damage-dealing property of throwing money as a sort of artificial attack. If they fought her normally, they would die. Typically, they would need a legendary class item to dispel Arachne's skill, but that would take a lot of time. This was the strength of throwing money. The damage from throwing money is calculated by the amount of money you throw, and this battle would require about 30 throws. When the maximum number of consecutive throws reached its limit, Arachne couldn't move and fell into a state of disorientation. When Arachne's health drops to half, if Danya can land a staggering blow at the right moment, it will cancel her transformation into her second phase. Her second phase has wide-ranging attacks that the party definitely wants to avoid. Thankfully, they can skip the phase transition, a 60-second long cutscene. Kira stood there, motionless and utterly confused about what was happening. The only things she could make out were a guy relentlessly throwing money, a monster struggling against the onslaught of coins, and that this was the hero the party was pinning their hopes on to defeat Arachne. Tite might have looked like an idiot, but he was completely fearless. He pushed through all the pressure, all the mockery, and focused on one single thing: defeating the enemy as quickly as possible. It was, admittedly, a ridiculously bizarre strategy. But that's just how it was. Just then, Danya realized she was out of mana, and she'd already used up all her mana potions. Tite kept throwing money relentlessly, and Danya couldn't help but wish she were in Ada's body. If she were, she wouldn't have run out of mana so easily. In a moment of carelessness, Danya stepped into the attack range of a swarm of spiders. But just then, Kira activated her skill, Valkyrie's Sweet Dance, creating a powerful whirlwind that wiped out the swarm. She had now snapped out of her daze and was ready to fight. Arachne, seeing there was no escape, began to beg for her life. She offered up everything: her puppets, her territory, her castle, and all her servants, as long as they didn't kill her. But Tite, seeing her pathetic begging, was reminded of the countless other women who had done the same. He simply thought to himself, time is more important than life. Without any hesitation, Tite dealt the final blow, finishing Arachne off. After the battle, he entered his usual post-speedrun reflection mode, reviewing what he'd done to prepare for the next run. However, the rest of the party, Kira included, just wished they didn't have to listen to his convoluted philosophy again. When asked about this habit, Tite defended his position. Every speedrun is a chance to learn and improve. I can't waste time, not even after a victory. There's a next time? There's really going to be a next time? They realized the castle was collapsing. But luckily, Danya took out Matatabi's traveling instrument, a special magical artifact that allowed for instant teleportation to any place they had visited before. It was a treasure on loan to her from the royal family. She announced, "Our destination is the capital city, Falshla." They returned to the Adventurers Guild, where Ida was still exhausted. Jian brought them an item called a prison-breaking thread, a rare consumable that allows one to escape from dungeons and boss battles. It cost 8,000 sen. Tite was confused, and Jian wondered why. He ever thought they were planning to actually kill Arachne. It wasn't an unreasonable assumption, since the whole thing was over in less than half an hour. It only took 15 minutes to defeat Arachne. Jian emphasized that with a prison-breaking thread, Tite could at least have gotten home safely, because even as a hero, he would feel guilty for letting a young comrade die senselessly. Tite calmly explained, "Arachne is already dead." At the Demon Lord's round table, a group was watching through a scrying mirror. They were stunned, exclaiming, "Arachne was just here yesterday." One of them wanted to rewatch the scene, calling it a death worth every coin. This made her burst out laughing, even as she found it all ridiculous. But it was a fitting end for Arachne. Her impenetrable defense skill, Karna Kavacha, was just something she'd borrowed anyway. She was defeated without even knowing her own weakness, A perfect end for a foolish insect like her. She really was the worst of the 4 heavenly kings. Another commented that the other 2 were being a bit too harsh. Well, that's how demons are. They're demons through and through. Their mockery wasn't born from arrogance, but from the privilege of the powerful. The hero defeated the demon lord on the very day he was summoned. On the 3rd day, he took down Arachne. It's hard to believe, but it's the truth. How did he know Arachne's weakness when even we, her strange counterparts, didn't know it during our first battles with her? Could he possess some legendary skill like prophecy or appraisal from the goddess? Thinking deeper, the demon lord still couldn't find an answer, and there was no logical explanation. What he knew for sure was Isekai'd moved too smoothly, as if he knew Arachne's weakness from the very start. He was like someone who'd fought this battle over and over, practicing it to perfection. But that's impossible. Recalling how the hero had so effortlessly beheaded the demon lord, it was simply unbelievable. The Demon King, the one humanity has fought with all its wisdom for thousands of years, was defeated that easily by just a few hits from a club. Since the Demon King had no weaknesses, he wondered, is Arachne's weakness really gold? How is that any different from throwing a rock? In terms of durability, human gold couldn't possibly be that strong, even if it was enchanted. But if that were possible, why wouldn't Arachne know? Even if she isn't the brightest, could she really be naive enough to blindly trust a flawed trump card? Too many thoughts were swirling in his head, but further speculation was useless without more information. Clinging to preconceived notions based on flawed reasoning is even more dangerous. In any case, the hero is an unprecedented threat, or thousands of years of demon rule are on the verge of collapse. The villain understood that he had to eliminate or persuade him by any means necessary. He wondered if Mor-chan would give up on revenge, but that was almost impossible. Mor-chan was ready to face this interesting hero from another world. Meanwhile, at Horizon Shine, Isekai'd was frantically looking for his smartphone, but couldn't find it anywhere. He searched again, not realizing he was shirtless with the girls nearby. When he finally came to his senses, he apologized for his rudeness. Explaining that he was not feeling great, he could say, I'm in a bit of a bad mood. His head was clearer now. He remembered being summoned to the world of Aniverse, defeating the Demon King on the first day as usual, and taking only 2 more days to eliminate the Elite Four's Arachne. This was the 4th day. Isekai'd noticed Kira was wearing a different outfit. It was the Valkyrie holiday outfit from her first DLC in Aniverse. Kira replied, You've been fighting for the past 3 days straight, so the fatigue must be setting in. She wanted Isekai'd to forget about fighting, at least for today, to rest both his mind and body. I figured you wouldn't be comfortable with a woman in armor standing before you. She had dressed this way to show her concern. She wanted to know if it was weird for her to be dressed differently than usual. To Isekai'd, it wasn't weird at all. On the contrary, this outfit suited her much better than her usual bikini armor. Danya suggested they could take a walk around town, since the weather was so nice, but Isekai'd mentioned he had a place he needed to go. Meanwhile, it seemed Kira was starting to develop feelings for him, or at least that's how it appeared. If she looked closely, she could see that Isekai'd actually had a rather handsome face. Unfortunately, Kira wasn't very good at hiding where she was looking, so Isekai'd noticed her staring. She told herself to calm down, but her mind kept wandering. Kira started to wonder if Danya and Isekai'd already had something going on. Why else would she be so calm seeing Isekai'd shirtless? Her mind was a mess, and Danya just casually commented that Kira was acting a little strange today. Isekai'd added that at least it didn't seem like a bug or a virus. As they walked around town, people started pointing and recognizing him as the hero who had caused such a stir recently. A crowd began to form. Seeing that he was the hero from another world, someone in the crowd asked if he was already done with Arachne, having heard the story from Jean. At least they knew he wasn't as suspicious as they first thought. Still, Jean really has a big mouth. Danya added that Arachne's castle was only a short distance from the capital, so they couldn't have kept it a secret anyway. Regardless, Isekai'd was drawing a lot of attention, just like being in the lobby of a speedrunning event. Little kids came up to him and asked all sorts of questions. Afterwards, they arrived at the new city refugee area, where the old woman was waiting for them. Isekai'd came bearing a souvenir from his battle with Arachne, and he handed it to the old woman, her face contorted in shock when she saw the gift. She remembered the day her older sister was killed right in front of her, and her regrets about being trapped there. Now, it was all over, and you won't have any more nightmares. Amidst her smile, Isekai'd could see a young and beautiful girl. That's who she used to be, he said his goodbyes. Kira remarked that she was surprised to see Isekai'd had feelings and priorities beyond speedrunning, noting a shift in her assessment of him. He explained that what they had just done was a side quest called The Butterfly and the Spider's Web, a side quest that was related to the plot but not necessary for the main ending. The reward was just a single potion, but he wanted to give it back to her because it was a memento of her older sister. His uncharacteristic words left them bewildered. Back at Adashield, Mironi needed to know Isekai'd's plan. She asked why he didn't request an S-rank mercenary team, as she wanted to help take down Arachne by introducing them to him. The mercenaries were shocked and saddened to hear that Isekai'd had left without them. Isekai'd explained that the tutorial for the mercenary system was very long. Mironi apologized for bothering them on their day off, but she mentioned an urgent questionnaire from the capital regarding the subjugation of Arachne, which required answers from the sages. Kira announced that she would write the report for the higher-ups and noted that it was a joyful, albeit brief, day. Kira told Isekai'd and Danya to enjoy the rest of their day. As they walked, they noticed the deserted streets. Feeling as if they were the only 2 people there, Isekai'd apologized for getting Danya involved in danger, but she reassured him that Kira had recovered just as planned so there was no need to apologize. She teased him about treating the world like an artificial game, then admitted that she had trusted both Kira and him during the Arachne subjugation. She hoped he wouldn't let her down. Suddenly, cavalry soldiers surrounded them and demanded they follow them to the castle, giving them no other choice. Tai'te started to sweat, not recognizing the story event. The soldiers brought him before the queen, who revealed that she had summoned him. Tai'te was stunned. He realized there were two Idas. At the princess's tower, Ida ordered the guards to leave, declaring that she had Danya by her side and needed no further protection. Tai'te was confused to see both Ada and Danya appear at the same time, suspecting it was a bug in the game. Ida then removed her disguise, revealing she was Ain, Ida's younger brother and body double. Tai'te was surprised, as he didn't know about Ain, even though he was so knowledgeable about the game's world. Danya remarked that Tai'te, who seemed to know everything about this world, was at a loss. The late king, a lecherous man, had fathered Ain with a prostitute, making Ain effectively Ida's uncle. Ain's mother passed away, and he was abandoned by the royal family, until they secretly took him in to be Ida's body double, due to their resemblance. Ain warned Tai'te that the details of the Arachne takedown campaign were critical, even though Tai'te boasting about his victory over the Demon Lord was a politically sensitive issue. The conquest of the Demon Lord is a major political issue, creating waves in the cabinet and the Council of Sages, which supports the kingdom and includes representatives from the 6 great ducal families. The sages feared the Demon Lord's retaliation and had forbidden anyone other than the other world hero from participating in the Demon Lord conquest. The council was uneasy about how quickly the Arachne conquest had taken place and demanded an explanation from the guildmaster. Ain summoned Tai'te to provide a more detailed account. Danya told Tai'te to tell them everything, including what they did right after he was summoned. She warned Ain that he was about to hear an insane story, but that he needed to be strong. Ain replied that he was already prepared for a wild tale and wouldn't be surprised. He already knew the Demon Lord had been defeated. Tai'te went on to explain that there's a competition in his world called a speedrun, aimed at defeating the Demon Lord. The true ending category involves defeating the 4 great gods. But at the time, Tai'te was just doing an any percent run. Danya cut in, saying this hero was a bit unusual, and Ain, though surprised, acknowledged that there had to be a limit to how unusual one could be. If that's the case, he said, then anyone would hide it. She didn't forget to mention Kira. Danya added that only she and Kira knew the Demon Lord had been defeated. The roots of evil hadn't been sealed yet, so revealing this information would only cause useless confusion. Ain affirmed that he trusted his sister's account and would try to handle the council, ensuring they wouldn't interfere with their activities. However, he admitted that he couldn't fully trust Tai'te just yet, especially with his incomprehensible power. Then, Ain gave Tai'te an important mission. Ain needed Tai'te to help rebuild the village of Tadenka, a land that had been occupied by Arachne. Now that Arachne was defeated, the village was liberated but still very vulnerable. Previously, Tadenka was a prosperous village with high demand for adventurers, thanks to its proximity to the capital and a nearby dungeon. The current concern is that villains and monsters might see it as an ideal spot for a new base, with the news of Arachne's defeat set to spread across the continent in the coming days. There's a real danger that another powerful monster could take over the area near the capital again. Ain wanted to prevent that by securing Tadenka village as soon as possible. He hoped this would help stabilize the region and prevent new threats from emerging. Ain wanted to establish minimal facilities in Tadenka as quickly as possible and move people there from the capital. The capital was becoming overcrowded with refugees from all over the country, so this plan would solve 2 problems at once. Since Tai'te was so confident in his speed, Ain gave him a 2-week deadline to complete the mission. Ain believed Tai'te could do it, although Danya protested, saying that building a village is a decade-long process. Besides, she pointed out that taking down a demon lord is completely different from building a settlement. However, Ain didn't want to give up on the plan without trying. He explained that he didn't expect Tai'te to rebuild the entire village by himself, as he had already arranged for the necessary workers. Ain's real goal was to keep Tai'te in Tadenka village for 2 weeks to deal with any villains and monsters. Ain had originally wanted to hire other adventurers for this task, but now he planned to observe Tai'te and assess his abilities during this time. Ain presented this as a challenge, not a royal decree. Tai'te asked if he could just build a castle wall, a town hall, and prepare the fields for the village. He claimed he could finish it in half an hour, even though this is a process that usually takes a long time. Danya was skeptical but tired of arguing, and she chided her brother for doubting Tai'te, especially while disguised as her. Tai'te said that Ain was just trying to protect his sister. Danya apologized for Ain's skepticism, explaining that it was because he cared for her. She reassured Ain that although Tai'te was strange, he was trustworthy and capable. Tai'te decided to accept the mission to protect Tadenka village. He planned to enter the village the next morning and finish the job before noon. Ain said he had a meeting at the parliament, but would try to check on the situation in the afternoon. Tai'te acknowledged the challenge of facing unexpected elements and stressed that optimizing in-game factors is crucial for speedruns. He hoped to complete the mission quickly and believed they had met Princess Ida's expectations. The next morning, the S-rank party was discussing how quickly Tai'te had defeated Arachne and wondering about his tactics. They were assigned to assist with the village's reconstruction and report on Tai'te's actions, which felt more like an investigation than helping out. The leader planned to apologize to Tai'te for underestimating him. Their discussion was interrupted by an attack from an elite-level monster, resulting in the immediate death of a party member. The 2 remaining members of the S-rank party prepared to retaliate, but They too were quickly defeated. She was disappointed that the fight wasn't challenging enough. She was bored by the predictable nature of her world. Upon finding and reading Princess Ida's letter about the hero from another world, she was intrigued, anticipating her meeting with him. She licked her lips in excitement, eager to uncover all of his secrets. Kira discovered that Taitei had finally met Ain, and she called Ain a scheming child for trying to contact her before seeing her report. Taitei was surprised to see Kira back in her bikini armor and asked if she had a bad relationship with Ain. She replied that they were neither friends nor enemies, adding that Ain was a very difficult person to approach who didn't open up easily, possibly due to his upbringing. Kira added that the only person Ain opened up to was Ada. Danya tried to convince Kira that Ain might actually like her, but Kira didn't really believe it, saying that Ain always looked down and never made eye contact with her. Taitei started to feel strange as the NPCs he knew were now talking about NPCs he wasn't familiar with. As they approached Tadanka village, Taitei, Danya, and Kira were greeted by Rospi, the slime that had previously transformed into the members of Silver Dragon Fang. Mashamu explained that they were the Silver Dragon Fang, an S-rank party from the Dragon Bones Guild, a well-known organization from the ancient Dragon Bones forest south of the kingdom, which served as a mark of their identity. Mashamu introduced the rest of the team to Taitei and announced that they were there to support him. Mashamu even showed Taitei a letter of authorization signed by Ain, which the slime had stolen from the original Mashamu. Kira introduced herself to the group and urged them not to treat her formally like a noble, as she considered herself just an ordinary adventurer. Mashamu said her request was a great help since he wasn't good with royal etiquette. Taitei couldn't quite remember who the Silver Dragon Fang were, so he decided to check his records. At that moment, he remembered that they were mercenaries that players could summon in battle. And this was the first time he had seen them speak, as players only knew their names and skills in Aniverse. Taitei felt relieved because unlike Ain, these three were NPCs he recognized. Raspi, inside the Silver Dragon Fang group, was ecstatic to finally meet Taitei, and she began to notice his powerful wooden staff. She then explained that her special ability, Brain Gourmand, allowed her to eat a target's brain, making all of their memories her own. Raspi relished the fact that even though she had successfully devoured 3 members of the Silver Dragon Fang, they suspected nothing. She declared that while she could have just been satisfied with Taitei's staff, she wanted all of him for herself. However, she decided to stop this line of thought, considering Taitei a rare delicacy that would be a waste to eat right away. The remaining members of Taitei's party also introduced themselves. Eliha then told Taitei she had heard a rumor that he had taken down Arachne, and asked him what kind of miracle he used. Taitei blushed and said he had simply done a speed run as usual. Kira tried to signal Taitei to be careful with his words, but Eliha interrupted, and told Taitei that the reason she was on this journey was to master magic and uncover the truth of all things. She added that if she could master speedrunning, perhaps she would get closer to her dream. As she did so, Eliha took Taitei's hands and tried to charm him, convincing him to reveal information about his speedrun. Kira saw this and was absolutely furious. Raspi in Eliha's body was delighted, believing that human men were easy to seduce. Taitei, on the other hand, was thrilled that Eliha was asking him about speedrunning, and he quickly agreed to join her, suggesting they speedrun Aniverse together. Kira pulled Taitei away from Eliha, asking him what he was doing, why he would reveal such important information to someone he knew practically nothing about, just because she was a beautiful woman. Taitei explained that he only did it because it's a tradition among hardcore Aniverse speedrunners to help beginners. He began to ramble on about how there are only 500 Aniverse speedrunners in the whole world, and that these players share information about glitches they discover. However, since many years have passed since Aniverse was released and players are finding fewer glitches, the speedrun route has now become too rigid. Taitei explained that speedrunning a game with no new discoveries becomes a game of just following the current route, with as few mistakes as possible. He told Eliha that what Aniverse needs is the perspective of a newcomer like her, because most players get stuck in old ways of thinking when only experts are involved. The chance of discovering something new increases if more players join the game. He also mentioned that the player who discovered the Arachne wall clip skip, which is used in the current any percent route, was actually a new runner who had only been speedrunning for 2 weeks. Taitei expressed his desire to make new speedrunning friends by respectfully supporting rookies, and that's why, even when faced with a scary old man, he patiently taught them all the details of Aniverse. Raspi tried to process the information she had just heard, and said that everything would be much easier if she just ate his brain. She then wished she could have seen him speedrunning while he was alive. Danya lightly chopped Taitei on the head, making him realize he had said too much, and he quickly apologized. Taitei then calmly explained to Kira that since the basic restoration speedrun route isn't related to the true ending, there's no bad outcome if someone knows about that route. Taitei announced that they should start the restoration speedrun immediately. Danya told him to slow down and announced that before starting the restoration speedrun, there was something else they needed to do first. Everyone went out to the field to remember the departed souls and pray for them. Mashamu complimented Danya on being very good with human language, and she replied that she had learned to speak from Princess Ada. After the small memorial ended, Taitei announced that they should get started, and the group was surprised when Taitei suddenly pulled out a frying pan. The group entered Falshilla, a dungeon, to gather the materials needed for the construction speedrun route. Evil spirits tend to gather deep within dungeons, where powerful hauntings cause bewitching branches to sprout from the roots of evil. Defeated monsters revive one day after their death. While rushing through the dungeon, the group encountered a frog monster. Raspy worried that the others would start suspecting her if she didn't join the fight, so she unexpectedly prepared the weapons for the members of Silver Dragon Fang. However, she was shocked when Tai and the group completely ignored the frog monster and continued to run. Tai explained that this dungeon only has one mini-boss every 5 floors, but they only need to defeat the mini-boss on the 5th basement floor, so they skip all other monsters to save time. Kira recalled that Tai did the same thing yesterday, and Danya added that this dungeon was much easier than Spiderfeld one. 2 minutes after entering the dungeon, they finally encountered a stone golem. Tai stopped and announced that the stone golem was their main target. It was huge, with high defense and HP, making it a tough challenge for beginners. However, a single hit from the strange staff was all it took to defeat it. Tai demonstrated this by destroying the golem in a single blow. Raspy was incredibly excited by the staff and called it amazing. After defeating the stone golem, they received a reward of 12 stones and a diamond flower. Tai reiterated that they needed a total of 180 stones to rebuild the barrier wall and the houses. He noted that while they could use a duplication glitch to gather just the stones, they needed 3 other types of random drop items. However, this time, they would keep defeating the stone golem until they got everything they needed. Kira and Danya were confused, since Tai had just destroyed the only stone golem. And no matter how much miasma was in the dungeon, the stone golem wouldn't respawn until the next day. Tai explained that this is where the frying pan comes in. He suggested everyone return to the 4th basement floor. Meanwhile, while passing through the 4th basement floor, he told them that there was a chest with a recovery item and an oven there, and that in many games, players encounter such a recovery area right before a boss fight. He pulled out the frying pan and said he needed to cook there. Raspy wondered if he wanted them to cook, not wanting them to fight on an empty stomach. However, Tai had another plan in mind. He began to vibrate, leaving Raspy surprised as she witnessed the clumsy sight. After a moment, he stopped shaking and explained that he had just equipped and unequipped the frying pan at the same time, putting them in a state of superposition. Kira wondered what Tai meant by superposition, and Danya asked him the difference between superposition and the duplication he had shown them earlier. Tai explained that, while the in-game cooking command only allows players to cook food, speedrunners can achieve the impossible in a state of superposition, which suddenly gives them the ability to cook gold. Everyone was disgusted by the thought of him cooking coins. After a while, as he cooked those coins, they disappeared and an object labeled number 151 appeared on the pan. This object was in the shape of a symbol with no image, and Tai explained that it was unused data, available during development, but not implemented in the final game, so it was an unused item. Tai further explained that it appeared as an error message, probably because the graphics weren't finished. Then Tai shocked everyone by demonstrating that a player could eat this error symbol because it was still considered a food item. The others looked at him in horror and screamed at him to spit it out. After Tai finished eating, he led the group back to the 5th basement floor. Unexpectedly, upon arriving, everyone was surprised to find that the stone golem had returned. Tai explained that eating item number 151 doesn't advance the in-game time, but player analysis had shown that a day still passes in the game system. Because this item was not implemented in the game, there was no way to know what item number 151 was intended for, but speedrunners had discovered that eating it caused a day to pass without advancing the in-game clock. It was for this reason that the speedrunners of Aniverse called item number 151 the time-skipping meal. Thanks to this, they could hunt the golem multiple times in a single day, repeating the process until they had enough stones and item drops. Iliha confessed to Kira and Danya that she really didn't understand what Tai's explanation meant, and Kira admitted that they didn't understand either, suggesting that maybe Tai was talking to himself to confirm his speedrunning process. Raspy then realized that this hero from another world was really good at monologuing. 16 minutes and 18 loops later, finally, they had gathered all the necessary materials. Tai announced that the next step was to return to the village using Matatabi travel. Danya transported them to the village, where Tai explained that they should place the collected stones in the material area. Since they had collected all the materials from the dungeon, the only thing missing was manpower. Tai instructed Danya to use Matatabi travel to take them all to the capital. Raspy realized she couldn't enter the capital because of the protective barrier, so she came up with an excuse. She said that the members of the Silver Dragon Fang Guild should stay behind to guard the materials. However, before Mashimu could say anything else, Danya activated Matatabi travel, teleporting everyone away. On the way to the capital, the protective barrier prevented Raspy from passing through. Inadvertently kicking her out while allowing the others to pass, she landed right outside the capital's entrance gate, and without wasting any time, she rushed a guard and devoured him. After successfully teleporting into the capital, Kira began to wonder where the members of the Silver Dragon Fang were, but Danya told her that Tai would get ahead of them if they didn't hurry. Kira still couldn't shake the thought that the guild members had failed to enter the capital despite teleporting with everyone. At the Carpenters Guild, specifically at the Gnome Group's headquarters, the leader, Baron May, scolded Tai for suddenly asking to borrow his workers. He explained that his workshop's employees were first class. The capital's walls were built by their Gnome Group, and even Falshella's castle, built overnight, was their handiwork from 2 generations ago. They only accepted first-class jobs. Tai then asked how he could be recognized by Baron May as first class. Baron May replied that if he was an adventurer, he should start by bringing him some rare items, such as the diamond flower. Baron May was stunned when Taitei quickly placed the diamond flower on the table before he could even finish his sentence. Next, Baron May asked for a dwarven die, and Taitei immediately produced it. Before Baron May could even ask for the next items, Taitei brought them all out, leaving Baron May surprised and wondering how Taitei knew exactly what to bring. Before Baron May could say anything more, he had no choice but to agree and let Taitei borrow his men. The group then returned to the village using Matatabi travel. They were surprised to see that a house frame had already been erected there, even though they had just left the Carpenters Guild. Taitei explained that because he had loaded the map with Matatabi travel, the buildings under construction had appeared ahead of schedule. The dwarves arrived later and began to repair the structures. The Silver Dragon Fang also arrived later, and their allies explained that the reason they were separated from the group was that they had spotted some goblins wandering on the outskirts of the village. However, Kira wasn't entirely convinced by the story. Although the dwarves were working very quickly, Danya realized that they wouldn't finish before the clock hit 30 minutes. However, Taitei surprised them by taking out another object, number 151, and explaining that he had made a few more earlier. In the blink of an eye, the village of Tadanka was fully restored in exactly 28 minutes and 37 seconds. Everyone was stunned, while Taitei was proud of himself for setting a new record of 28 minutes, compared to the original estimate of 30 minutes. Raspi was ecstatic over Taitei's achievement, and began to drool as she realized she could no longer restrain her desire to eat Taitei. At the royal castle, about 2 kilometers from Tadanka village, Hein was extremely anxious and astonished as she looked through her binoculars and saw that the village had been completely destroyed. He ordered his guards to prepare a trip to Tadanka village. His guards reminded him of his previously scheduled meeting, but Ain insisted on postponing it, arguing that the situation in the village was more urgent. Ain felt both disappointed and angry to see that Taitei had rebuilt the village in such a short amount of time. Meanwhile, back in the village, Raspi, in the guise of Eliha, continued to drool as she watched Taitei slowly approaching him, ready to devour him. She realized that if she did, it would be the 4th person she had eaten in a row, and began to wonder if she should just make a feast out of the situation, since she had already gone this far. She wondered if Taitei knew she was there, as through his senses, Taitei began to feel a gaze and the sensation of someone watching him from behind. When he turned around, he saw Eliha and innocently asked if she was hungry. In response, he prepared a lavish meal for everyone himself. The others looked at the food with suspicion, as it was the first time they had seen such a dish. It took some convincing from Taitei before they agreed to eat, but they remained wary of the members of the Silver Dragon Fang. Eliha encouraged them to try the dish, assuring them she found it very delicious. Eliha giggled and happily accepted the meal. Ein arrived at the village in a carriage, and seemed displeased to see that Taitei had actually kept his promise. Kira welcomed Ain to the village, and began to admire her massive chest, commenting that it had been a while since they last met. Ain inspected the building and confirmed that it was indeed well built. Ain acknowledged Taitei's efforts and thanked him. Then Ain announced that he had not come to the village alone, and that he had brought someone else who would be staying here. He asked someone to step out of the carriage, and the group was stunned to see the old woman from the village. The woman was surprised and felt like she was in a dream. She even remarked that although the village had changed quite a bit from before, the stone houses still kept their distinctive shape. Just then, the woman's brilliant judgment suddenly kicked in, and she recognized the true forms of the members of the Silver Dragon Fang. She tried to warn Taitei to stay away, but Raspi suddenly lunged forward and nearly devoured him. However, Kira quickly intervened to save Taitei. Kira inflicted a significant amount of damage to Raspi's core, but it wasn't enough to destroy her. Meanwhile, Taitei was too stunned to react. Realizing that one of the Elite Four had been with them all along, Kira wondered why Raspi was here, until she recalled that Raspi could take on the form and memories of those she devoured. She suddenly realized that Raspi must have devoured 3 members of the Silver Dragon Fang. Everyone was surprised to see that Raspi had actually taken Taitei's staff, and she said she would keep it as a souvenir. Raspi then reached out, grabbing both Ain and Danya at the same time. However, Eliha quickly intervened to save Danya, while Ain's guard was too slow to protect him. Raspi decided to leave with just Ain, and told Taitei that if he wanted to save Ain, he would have to come to the Swamp of Famine. Raspi then teleported away instantly with Ain. Taitei was too stunned to understand what was happening. He tried to process everything: the appearance of one of the Elite Four, Raspi leaving the Swamp of Famine, stealing his staff, and kidnapping an NPC who shouldn't even be here. He was even more confused because this situation had never occurred in Aniverse. Danya begged Taitei to quickly save Ain before he was killed. Kira stepped forward and said she disagreed with that. She asked Taitei if this attack had been unexpected, because she knew there was no way he, the one who was always so calm, would lose his composure over a mere surprise attack. This meant the fight with Raspi wasn't part of his plan, and worse, his wooden staff had also been stolen. Kira wondered if Taitei was planning to die a useless death. She told Danya that they needed to prepare thoroughly for the battle, even if it took time, adding that a spare body was for situations exactly like this. Taitei noticed Danya's sadness over her brother's kidnapping, and he told Kira that although Raspi's appearance was unexpected, she was still the same Raspi from the Elite Four that he knew. He went on to say that there were still plenty of chances to win because they needed to get to the Swamp of Famine, which meant they'd be back on the normal route. However, Taitei admitted that it would be very difficult since he couldn't get back the strange staff, but there were still other ways to defeat Raspi. He admitted that even though he'd made a disgraceful scene earlier, he would try to make up for it with his backup strategies. Kira informed them that to get through the Swamp of Famine, they had to pass through the Dragon's Tail mountain range. Going around it would take 2 hours, and the monsters got bigger the farther they went from the capital. Even the griffins couldn't fly into this area because of the high altitude. Tite laughed and said that he knew a glitch in the game that could get them there in 15 minutes.